Langton, we thank you all for being here. And Reverend Jones, we have to start with you because, frankly, you have ignited a firestorm. You have insulted millions of people around the world and here in Metro Detroit. What are you trying to do and why here?
Yeah, we are going to continue to try to raise awareness around America, around the world. As you might be aware of, I spent 30 years as a missionary in Europe. During that time, I saw the growth of radical Islam. What we are trying to do is raise an awareness of jihad, of Sharia. We are trying to raise that awareness here in America. As we have said many times, we have come here to Dearborn in the spirit of peace. We are not demonstrating against the rights of Muslims. We are not demonstrating against the mosque there. We are not demonstrating against the Quran. The Muslims in this country, if they have come here legally, if they have been born here, if they've converted to Islam, then they are, of course, welcome here. The only thing that we ask is that they honor and obey and submit to the Constitution of the United States. If they are willing to do that, then our message to them is one of welcome. If they have come here with a secret hidden agenda, which is definitely possible, we have seen that in Europe. Muslim leaders here in America have spoken out, said that they would like to have Sharia be a governing force in certain domestic issues. Then our message is to them that they are not welcome. If they have come here, as I said, to honor and obey, submit to the Constitution of the United States, then that is fine. We are just concerned about that radical element. We are concerned about jihad, and we are concerned about Sharia.
Imam Quzwini, you lead the largest mosque in North America. What do you want Terry Jones to know about Islam?
Well, first of all, I would like to ask Pastor Terry Jones to define for us what does he mean when he speaks about the Sharia.
Well, what I actually mean, I'm talking about any form of government, whether it be Sharia. My knowledge of that is, of course, somewhat limited, but I do realize that it is a very brutal form of punishment. It involves stoning. It involves other very cruel forms of punishment. But it not only has to do with Sharia, whether it be any other religion that has a governmental force adapted to it, connected to it, then of course we are against that. We believe that the United States can only be governed by the Constitution. As I said, I spent 30 years in Europe. I traveled around the world. I have seen and believe that the United States of America is the greatest country in the world. But it is only great because we have the Constitution.
I don't think.
And one of the very aspects of that Constitution is the freedom of speech.
But I don't think that the Imam would disagree with you.
No, definitely.
Yeah, then of course we have no problem.
So why then this problem, Pastor Terry Jones? Why all this commotion you're causing in the world, in Florida? You burned the Quran 3 weeks ago. And of course you live in a free country and you're entitled to your opinion and every action you do. But for someone who calls himself a pastor, someone who speaks in the name of Jesus, Jesus was a great messenger who asked his followers to embrace others, to love his enemies. And I think someone who calls himself pastor, I don't think you have moral grounds to burn a divine book that respects and glorifies Jesus whom you speak in his name. If you read the Quran that you burned 3 weeks ago or 1 month ago, you will find out easily, you will find out that almost in every page in the Quran, there is a verse in the Quran glorifying Jesus. So I think what you did 3 weeks ago was an insult against Jesus, against your own faith. Because if you really believe in Jesus, then the Quran glorifies Jesus. So when you burn the Quran, you're insulting Jesus. You're insulting Christianity.
Let's look at Sharia law as we understand it. Here's the definition based on the Quran, that lays down certain duties and penalties for Muslims. But it's much more than that, Imam.
Well, I think what Pastor Jones needs to know, he needs to get educated on the meaning of the words he is talking about. It seems that he is well misinformed about things he has been talking about without having an accurate understanding of them. Well,
Reverend, have you ever read the Quran?
I have read parts of the Quran. But there is no doubt, I have never claimed to be an expert on the Quran, but there are experts all around the world who definitely have the same opinion.
Well, here's an expert right here, right next to you.
That the Quran can at times lead to violent terrorist activities, but that's not the point. The point is, I am making a statement. I am warning against Sharia and against jihad. That is a very, very valid point. And that is what we are wanting to do if there is no such thing.
But in so doing, are you not labeling everyone who is
absolutely not. I have made that very, very clear. Very clear. We have talked before. I have made it very clear that there are probably millions of Muslims who are peaceful, who do not desire that. But there is a radical element of Islam that cannot be denied. We are not saying he is radical. We are not saying that the Islamic Center here is radical. We are not saying the Muslims in Dearborn are radical, but there is no doubt about it. There is a radical. We burned a book on March the 20th. We burned a book 7,000 miles away. It is a book. I do not care how holy you think it is. It is still, it is not flesh and blood. It does not live. It does not breathe. We burned a book, and 7,000 miles away, people were killed. So something is definitely wrong. Well, so all we are saying is we are demonstrating against that.
Well, the question some people would have, do you feel you have blood on your hands? Because of what you did here in the USA, 12 innocent people were killed.
Oh, absolutely not. Well, what we do believe, we believe that those people and those governments should be held accountable. We believe that our president, who has done a very poor job so far, we believe that our president should not only speak out against the radical element of Islam, we have got to call these countries to accountability in the UN, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Indonesia. They have to change their laws to adapt their laws to human rights, or they should be removed from the UN.
Reverend Rowe, let me bring you in here, because there are zealots in every faith. Mm-hmm. He calls himself a Christian, so do you. You read the same Bible. Mm-hmm. Why the difference in attitudes?
Well, I'm here because I'm not trying to defend violence anywhere on the part of the Christian Taliban or anybody else. I'm here to say that what happened with burning the Quran didn't just burn the Quran. It burned the Sermon on the Mount. It burned every statement that Jesus made about loving enemies, about if you think people are your enemies, whether it's Sharia law or whatever it is, the statement is very clear. You have heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I don't happen to think that I have the same enemies you do, but if those are your enemies, the worst thing that happens here is that somebody might think that Christianity actually supports what you did. I'm here to say there's nothing in the gospel that I read that supports the burning of the Quran. And if you knew what was happening, and given what happened on September 11th, you had to know there was going to be violence as a result of the burning. I think that some of the blood is on your hands for every ounce that was spilled, because if you knew that your act was going to create violence, then the violence is your violence. You cannot just duck it and say somebody else did the killing when you knew that your act was going to create the killing. So I think, first of all, we have to say, I don't own your version of Christianity at all. And I think that, in fact, you burnt a whole lot more than the Quran. I think you burnt every statement of Jesus Christ about nonviolence. We just came out of Holy Week, in which Jesus walked into a very violent city on a donkey in peace. And the peaceful Jesus that I know would never have done what you did. And you knew, because of all the outpouring of September 11th, that it was going to create death. And I think that death is on your hands.
That's an important question. If you call yourself a Christian, would Jesus Christ have done what you did?
Well, I think for one thing, we're definitely getting sidetracked, and another thing, I think definitely that he would. In Acts 19:19, we see very clearly people converted to Christianity. They brought books that they felt were dangerous. They brought magic books worth great sums of money, and they burned them. We see Jesus went into the temple, threw out the money changers. We see every time in the Old Testament that a new king, a godly king, came into place, he went down and tore down the high places. But I think we're missing the point. We are here in Dearborn not to burn the Quran. We are not here to discuss the burning of the Quran. We are here to send a very clear message to the radical element of Islam. That is our message. Just a few months ago, we talked about burning of the Quran, and then there's violence. Burn the Quran. Radical Islam does not need an excuse. Coptic Christians came out of their churches after a service, and they were just simply killed. We have to remember the radical element of Islam has been killing people for hundreds and hundreds of years, every single day.
Then maybe it is best to protest that.
We're not talking about him.
Then maybe it is best.
We're not talking about him.
But
we're talking about the radical element.
But why choose a place of peace to stage that protest? We're going to talk more about that and about the legal issues involved when we come back as Let It Rip continues. And remember, you can join our discussion online, Let It Rip, myfoxdetroit.com, on the Facebook page. We'll be back with more. Angry protesters chanting that Pastor Terry Jones should go back to Florida and not go through with his planned demonstration tomorrow in Dearborn. But those protesters will not decide the issue. A judge and a 6-member jury will decide. But, Charlie, I've never heard of anybody being put on trial for something they haven't done yet.
You know, Hugh, I really haven't either. This is kind of an unusual situation. The prosecutor and I think the judge is very concerned that the message that Reverend Jones will send will cause a riot. And so what the judge is doing is he's setting up this trial. And I guess the procedure, as now we found out, is that a jury of 6 people will decide. The only issue is whether the speech by Reverend Jones is likely to breach the peace, whatever that means. Breach the peace means a disturbance, something like that. But it's not very well defined in the statute that came out of our books in Michigan in 1857. So I've been doing this 25 years. I've never had a case like this. I've never seen a case like this. It's very unusual. But the bottom line here is that procedurally, if the jury comes back and says, yes, Reverend Jones is likely to cause a breach of the peace, then the judge will set the parameters of what he can speak. And probably it will be a money, $40,000, but it's also ability to pay. So if he doesn't have any money, it may not be that much. But if the jury comes back and says, nah, let Reverend Jones speak, he's not a breach of the peace, I would say Reverend Jones could probably speak anywhere he wants.
And I think Reverend Jones is going to stage his protest no matter what that jury decides. Am I right?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. Let's go to you, Imam Quzwini. A wonderful demonstration today. People of all faiths, Jews, Muslims, Christians, joining hands together at the mosque today. And yet there are many Americans who fear Islam and what it represents.
I believe they fear Islam because of people like Pastor Terry Jones, who are working on their paranoia, who are making monster out of Islam. I would respectfully ask Pastor Terry Jones to go and read the Quran instead of burning the Quran. And he will be amazed and surprised on the commonalities that exist between Islam and Christianity. The problem is Pastor Jones has not read the Quran. He has no knowledge of the Quran. Therefore, he's trying to make a monster out of the Quran, and by that he is terrifying Americans from Islam, and by telling them that Islam is the danger. Now, no one is denying that there are radicals in Islam, as there are radicals in Christianity. I consider him one of the radicals in Christianity. We have people like Timothy McVeigh, who killed hundreds of innocent people in Oklahoma 10, 15 years ago in the name of Jesus. We have people who committed all kinds of heinous crimes in the name of church and in the name of Jesus, peace be upon him. Would I hold Christianity responsible for their acts? No, of course no. I'm not going to do that, because I understand in every faith there is a fringe group who may use religion for their own interest, and Islam is no exception. Why I would hold 1.5 billion Muslims responsible for the act of a small fringe group that has been distorting Islam? We all agree that there are people who have hijacked Islam and gave it a bad name, but that doesn't mean Islam should be held responsible for them. So I would invite Pastor Jones to learn about Quran, learn about Islam, and just be able to distinguish between those fringe groups who in no way would represent the mainstream Islam and a divine faith that has so much to offer to this world and to humanity. The divine faith that speaks highly of Christianity and Judaism. We in our religion, we believe if someone does not believe in Jesus, does not believe in Moses, he cannot claim to be Muslim. So in order for you to be a true Muslim, you have to embrace Jesus and his message. You have to embrace Moses and his message. And it seems that Pastor Jones does not get that. Now, I want to go back to the Sharia law that he's been talking about. We asked him, how does he define the Sharia law? He said he thinks that Sharia law is the brutal punishment. Now, what brutal punishment he's talking about? Is he speaking about the stoning? Now, let me, for his reference, the stoning was mentioned in the Bible, not in the Quran. There is a reference to the stoning in the Bible, not in the Quran. Right. Now, if he's talking about what Taliban rule did in Afghanistan 15 years ago when they were stoning people, well, Taliban does not represent Islam. Everyone knows that the Taliban rule does not represent the spirit of Islam. I am someone who numerous times condemned what Taliban did against people in Afghanistan, and I said that these people are self-declared religious leaders who are not recognized by the mainstream Islam. So he cannot also hold Islam responsible for the act of Taliban in Afghanistan when they were stoning people. Here in America, we have 6 million Muslims. I challenge Pastor Jones, if he can bring me one Muslim in the United States who would say that we are not abided by the U.S. laws. All these Muslims are abided by the U.S. laws. So if let me ask him this question: if there is a reference to the stoning in the Bible, does that mean the Christian in the United States now are calling for implementing stoning in the United States? This is, I think, a wrong analogy. So I believe that his understanding of the Sharia law is definitely distorted. He does not have accurate understanding of what he is telling people, what he is talking about. He can demonstrate against radical Islam. That's his right. He can do that, and he is entitled to do that. But I also would like to ask him, as I always do, when I talk about extremism and radicalism in other faiths, I would condemn radicalism and extremism in my faith first. So he has to do the same thing. When he talks about radicals and that he needs to rally people against radical Islam, would he also do the same thing by rallying people against radical Christians? Would he tolerate those who would go and blow up abortion clinics here? What he would call them? Aren't these radicals? Why he would not speak against them? Why he chose to be silent about those radicals who call themselves Christians, but he only chose to attack those who call themselves radicals in Islam? So I think this is double standard, and someone who calls himself pastor, a religious leader, he has to take the higher ground.
Let me ask both of you, what do you call someone who straps a bomb to himself to kill innocent people? Do you call them martyrs, or do you call them killers?
I call them murderer. The Quran called these people murderer. The Quran that Pastor Terry Jones burned 3 weeks ago calls these people murderer. And the Quran is very clear that if you kill one innocent person, you will be viewed by God as if you have killed the entire mankind. So of course someone who kills other innocent people, he is viewed as a murderer in the eyes of God. And by the way, I would like to take this opportunity to condemn the killings that took place in Afghanistan 3 weeks ago when Pastor Terry Jones burned the Quran. But I want to say one thing. When Pastor Terry Jones burned the Quran, those who committed that crime, and I unequivocally condemn that attack, it was carried out by lunatic Muslims. These people are not normal people. These people were lunatics. But who pushed them to do that? Someone who calls himself pastor, someone who calls himself a religious leader. He pushed them to do that. So yes, I agree that there is blood on his hand for pushing these lunatics to kill those innocent people at the United Nations headquarters in Afghanistan. And I hold him also partially responsible for these killings.
That's right.
Okay. Reverend Jones, your response.
Yeah, sure. Since 9/11, there's been over 17,000 successful terrorist attacks. I mean, to hold us responsible for what someone does 7,000 miles away is totally ridiculous. You can see that in our own American history. In recent history, we had the movement by Martin Luther King Jr. During that movement, many people were killed, but nobody would say it was Martin Luther King Jr.'s fault. I think that the Imam, I think the problem there is that they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. In other words, they talk all this peace, but see, there's really no proof of that. Because like as he said, in America right now you have 7 million, you have 9 million. So of course here in America, as long as they are in the minority, of course, what are they going to say? We want to rise up, we want to take over, Islam means submission, world domination. Is that what they're going to say?
He's not saying that.
I didn't say did. I said they. Is that what they're going to say? No. You look at Muslim-dominated countries. See, it's not important. It's not important what a minority says in a country, as long as that minority is a minority. It is important what
you're a minority and you're speaking and no one stopped you. Muslims can do the same.
It is important what a minority does when it becomes a majority. How does it then treat the minority under them? And in Islam-dominated countries, in Quran-dominated countries, we do not see this peace, peace, peace.
But is this
what
you are doing the way to treat minorities in this country? I'm not so sure it is. We'll be back with more of this discussion. Still to come on Let It Rip. It's time to hear from you, the Fox 2 viewers. This is a very emotional issue for so many people. We're going to read some of your comments when Let It Rip continues. The Fox 2 viewers continue to sound off at myfoxdetroit.com. One viewer writes, "Don't like it, don't listen, but don't you dare try to take it away. Too many people died for this right." Another blogger says, "If he is truly a man of God, then he would be looking for peace, not trying to create riots. Go back to Florida. We don't want it here." Fox 2 viewer Marie says, "It is nothing but a publicity hound. Jones is ignorant about how culturally and religiously diverse our area is." Alicia King writes, "I'm a Christian woman, but I would not burn their holy book, just as I would not want mine burned. There is something called respect. This man comes to Michigan to stir up trouble, and the kind of trouble that has severe consequences." Reverend Rowe, you heard Reverend Jones compare himself to Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I think it's blasphemy. I think it's an absolute lie, and it's a lie on Jesus and not just on Martin Luther King and what he died for. He was nonviolent. The act of burning the Quran was a violent act. He can't duck that. The people who died, and he knew that that violence was going to happen. I think the blood is on his hands. And for him to even say the word Martin Luther King and the nonviolent movement that had to do with Martin Luther King is simply blasphemy. And, you know, it's Islamophobia. It's just right up there with racism. I tell you, this man is lying about Christianity, he's lying about Martin Luther King, and he's lying about Islam. He's not just burning the Quran, he burned the Sermon on the Mount. He burned everything I believe in when he did that, and everything that Imam believes in, and everything that Judaism believes in. And he sits here trying to protect us from a force that doesn't exist. Can you name one neighborhood in this city or in this country that is Sharia law? Can you name one person who is under Sharia law? I can't, and he can't either. He has created a fear that has nothing to be afraid of, and so that he can get attention. And we're here because the media is going to cover it, whether we're here or not.
Tomorrow, though, no matter what the message is, let him sink his own ship if he's so bad. Should he be able to speak tomorrow? That's the issue for the judge.
Nobody is saying that he can't speak. All we're saying
is
that what he's saying is a lie.
Okay, but here's the thing. You can settle this night now. On Let It Rip, you can agree to tomorrow go into the mosque, join hands with the Imam and the people there, and to rally for peace.
He'll never do that.
Will you try to do that?
Of course he won't.
Instead of denouncing Islam tomorrow?
How could he finally do that?
No, we will not. But we can invite him to come and join us against terrorism, against the radical element, against whatever he wants to call it. He can come and join us because he is
the Imam is against terrorism.
Oh, good that he can come.
Why are you at a place of peace?
We thank you
protesting something that doesn't exist.
We thank you all for being here. We thank you for your insights, and we thank you for watching. As always,
this man is insane.
We thank you for watching this edition of Let It Rip.